Today we sit down and have a conversation with Wylie McGraw. Wylie is a radical performance accelerator, and when we say radical, we mean radical. Wylie does not only help leaders, he optimizes them. By having an extraordinary ability to see unresolved stresses in people's lives that are really holding them back, Wylie is able to unlock their self-mastery. Wylie is a former star baseball player who yielded to the fear of the unknown himself to become a bull rider and an Army combat veteran before taking his talents to executives. Sit back and listen to how Wylie's unconventional style, intensity, and access to cutting-edge tools is really only for a certain type of executive who is ready to face their fears and radically accelerate. Enjoy the episode. Wylie, welcome to the Entrepreneurs United podcast. Rich and I are excited to erupt with passion after this conversation. Love to learn a little bit more about your background specifically before you started the Radical Performance Acceleration company and what you are doing today now with entrepreneurs. So take us way back. I see here in your LinkedIn profile, you were a pitcher, bull rider, combat vet. Maybe you should start there before we even get to business, because that sounds exciting in and of itself.
Well, first of all, gentlemen, thank you for having me. I look forward to diving into this deep with you and giving some real good power punches for your audience to grasp some new insights that really challenge their mindset and how they view high performance and leadership. And yeah, I think that's an enticing background that most people want to dive into. You don't hear those things in tandem usually, which is the sports, the bull riding, and the combat together. But just to give you a little bit of background, now I've explained more in detail about my past. If people want to really delve into those details, it's on my website. But for you both right now in your audience, these are just life experiences that I had that allowed me to cultivate more awareness and more understanding of human performance. As a star athlete, though, and I'm writing something about it right now, where I was expected to perform a hyper-focused skill set as a pitcher. I grew up in an atmosphere where I had the talent and I had the skill, and my father cultivated that. As a semi-pro ball player himself, he recognized it and he put me in that environment to really challenge my abilities as a baseball player. And I loved the sport, but that environment was not, I would say, cultivating the best, most optimized version of me. Okay. And it only came to me as I got older and started to realize that I was performing for my father's expectations and not because of the love of the game itself. Mm-hmm. And I realized through the stress that brought me that I needed to break away from it because I was not feeling fulfilled and satisfied, even though I may have loved rising in the ranks, being mentored by pro baseball players, getting connected with people like Mickey Mantle, Rod Carew, Bo Jackson, etc. And I broke away from that and I put myself in a more challenging world of rodeo. Rodeo just intuitively felt right, even though it was scary, it was unknown, and it was highly dangerous. So I want to make sure that transition is understood here, that I moved myself into a more holistic real world challenge that allowed me to ignite more of my own potential within. And I found in that environment, the most uncomfortable position I could be in would be on the back of a wild animal. Right? I mean, I found myself being tuned into more of my intuition, more connected to a hyper-focused, I would say, mindset on my ability to welcome in the discomfort of that environment, embrace it, and allow it to be part of me versus something that was outside of me. And I found every time that I sat down on the back of a bull and I consistently rode weekend in and weekend out, that the more I embraced the discomfort that was present in that environment, the more unleashed I started to feel, the more potential I started to be able to tap into. And my performance as a bull rider drastically increased or accelerated to another level, where I rose into the ranks with my pro rodeo mentors who pushed me constantly in those environments. And then eventually got to the point where I needed more, and I needed more real world challenge. I needed to go outside of that even further. And that's when the military came knocking, and I joined the Army, became a combat infantryman with the 101st Airborne Division. I served 3 tours overseas, and it was in the middle of combat. I really started to cultivate my understanding of human performance, what stress was, how it was actually suppressing our potential, and what we needed to actually do to truly unleash who we are so that we can perform at the top of our game consistently and without all that chaos and stress that we are accustomed to when it comes to success. So that's a little bit of a truncated version of my background in a nutshell to get me to the point where I found that self-mastery was the most important thing. bringing myself to the most uncomfortable positions to be challenged, to face all my unresolved stress and allow myself to really expand into the man I wanted to be. And then I built something around that called Radical Performance Acceleration. I've been working as a performance accelerator for the better part of 13 years behind the scenes with high powered leaders across industries like Wall Street, Hollywood, professional sports, personal development, and so on. And now I'm sitting here having great conversations with people like you looking to really expand this paradigm and getting these high achievers, these entrepreneurs, new insights to really challenge the way they stretch themselves and face the discomfort of their own growth so they can be optimized and they can perform at the top of their game.
That's great. Well, first off, on behalf of both of us, thank you for your service. And Rich, that's personal and dear to his heart. His daughter has joined the military here in the past year or so.
Wow. Wow. Best to her. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to ask this question because I'm just absolutely curious. You're in the baseball ranks. You're playing this game. You obviously have a lot of talent. You realize, you know what, this is causing more stress than enjoyment. I'm not maximizing my full potential and my full happiness. How do you land on rodeo versus football versus something else?
It was an ignited awareness that I was hyper focused on one skill. Yeah. Now, baseball has its, in sports in general, stretch you from that physicality aspect and the mindset specifically. But there was the environmental stress being placed upon me to be perfect. Yep. There was this hyper-focused skill on mindset only and making sure that I was performing the best of my ability so that I could start every year on the teams that I was chosen for, and eventually get the scouts enticed by who I was. And of course, I had access to pro baseball mentors. I was trained by certain pitching staff, different professional teams. And it was just expected of me to be focused on that and that alone. And when I wanted to explore more of myself and my life outside of that, it was almost made wrong by doing so because it was distracting from what mattered in that moment. And to me, that stress was not enough for me to feel, I would say, adequate as an athlete, despite no matter how much success, guys, that I created. Yeah. It was just not right. Something felt off. And I will tell you, it was almost like a natural evolution where I started to connect with people in the rodeo world. Yeah. I found my buddy introducing me to certain folks that were professionals and say, hey, look, you should come explore this. I think you would enjoy it given how wild you really are at the end of the day. Sure. And I felt that was the right place for me to go. So it was just a more intuitive approach to what's next for me as a man. It doesn't mean everybody's going to go down that road. But in that decision to ride bulls, I found wow, real world challenges where we're really going to unleash who we are, real uncomfortable situations where we can access our potential and become more of who we want to be, not what is expected of us by our society, by our parents, by what we are taught or learned from household names or other people in the public eye. It's who are you and what makes you optimal? And that's why that world came knocking, and it just made sense for me to jump. And I loved it. I rode for a very long time, and I was always uncomfortable no matter how many rides I had under my belt. But I found that I embraced that discomfort, and it allowed me to be more of this man, this wild side that I had been waiting to meet. And that's why it was so enticing to me.
Yeah, that's awesome. I appreciate you sharing all of that. And obviously you have these experiences. And is it fair to say that Radical Performance Acceleration is from a business side is the only venture you've been involved with beyond military and bull riding and baseball?
I will say I started working with veterans as a combat veteran myself, understanding the innate stress and chaos that comes from being in war. It just naturally made sense for me to start working with people of my caliber as veterans. And Radical Performance Acceleration is a name that just encompasses who I am, the gift that I was brought into this world with, my ability to see blind spots, erupt and eradicate stress. And I'm talking about the unresolved stress from your life experiences, not our normal stresses that we experience as business owners, entrepreneurs, leaders, etc. And when I found that I had that gift, I wanted to cultivate it and build something around that. And that's why I've only been focused on being this behind the scenes resource for very exclusive type of high achiever and leader who can handle the level of intensity and self-mastery that I in fact put them through. Because in my work, as the name says, Radical Performance Acceleration, it is not a program. I'm not a coach. I'm a performance accelerator. My work is all about looking at every aspect of the leader's life, optimizing them holistically in real time so they can experience that elite edge that they're looking for. So to give you just a quick example on that is people like you, I mean, high achievers are always looking for ways to take their game to the next level. We bring in resources outside of us that are meant to challenge us and give us better skills and strategies on being able to grow and move to that next level. What I bring to the table in my work is access to cutting edge tools that I use holistically in real time with my clients as their life is happening, and putting them through those challenges I know that will erupt those blind spots that I can see that are plaguing them and their performance. And by bringing those cutting edge tools to the table and utilizing my wisdom and my life experiences, my understanding of human performance, that's where we can accelerate these leaders to the top of their game so they can sustain it and actually achieve those optimal results that they're grinding every day for. Exponential growth and wealth impact and bottom line, healthier, more meaningful relationships, more optimized health, better focus, better clarity, more in touch with their intuition and their power, knowing who they are. And those results are what these leaders are constantly craving. So that's why I bring it. Yeah.
Wylie, talk to me about how to go about unlocking self-mastery. What's the formula that you take your clients into to unlock self-mastery?
We find ourselves as high achievers, leaders especially, being caught up in the steps, processes, strategies, and systems for growth, for business development, for leadership. And what I bring to the table here is a challenging new approach towards high performance and being a peak performer, transitioning these high achievers into high performers. And what I mean by that is the only way you're actually going to, in fact, unlock all of your potential, access where your real power is derived from, is first and foremost being willing to yield to the fear of the unknown. The fear of the unknown plagues us all. It's a part of who we are inherently as we evolved as a species. But what I have developed and what I have understood through those crazy life experiences that we just talked about was adapting and connecting to this yielding aspect of the fear itself, because the unknowns are not what are actually scary. What's really scary for us as human beings is what is left unresolved or unfaced within us. But we project outward and see things outside of us as the problem, and we never stop to consider, what have I not dealt with? What have I not looked at as a person first and foremost that could in fact be suppressing my potential, not allowing me to make the best decisions, keeping me in the grind, keeping me focused on stress and chaos and burnout, and not giving me access to where it is that I want to go. So to bring that to conclusion for you, it's not necessarily a formula, it's a framework. So I provide a framework in a relationship dynamic with specific types of people who are looking to be radically shaken up in real time through real world experiences that make them the most uncomfortable, so that I can get them at their most vulnerable state that exposes those blind spots, allows them to experience the stress that plagues them, rattle from within, so they can get it to their conscious mind and we can face it, battle it head on. And then from there, the things that we start to add into their repertoire and their, their quiver, so to speak, for their growth and their acceleration just becomes highly sustainable and accelerates them to where they want to go, despite what defines their level of success. So I want to make sure that that lands is, it's not a formula, it's a framework. It's all about being in that real time with those types of people. And if you are looking to start unlocking your potential, you have to first start with being willing to yield to the fear of the unknown, embrace the most uncomfortable of situations that can challenge you and stretch you.
So the first part of the framework is yielding to the fear of the unknown. Can you walk me through the framework from there?
Yeah, I get we're I want to make sure that I can provide this information that people can bite into. But I don't want to get lost in the idea that this is a step-by-step process that we can break down. And I want to make a point to this, that this is why I've been behind the scenes for a very long time, because I have found we are so overwhelmed with the idea that we can and should break everything down into a how it's done, step-by-step process. And I will back that up to the reason why we need to know how with everything that comes our way is in part due to that fear that we have not faced or yielded to when it comes to our own growth. We want to control what happens to us. We want to control the resources that we hire or bring into our lives. We want to be able to have some semblance of understanding before we can make the decision to step into it. And the only aspect that I'm talking about here is your willingness to embrace the suck that comes from that fear, stepping towards it regardless of what it looks like, however it's presented to you, and be willing to be pushed in ways you never have by an outside force that holds you accountable in real time as things are happening to you and around you, so you can learn how to better manage yourself no matter what stress or what intensity you face in your life and business. So the framework, so to speak, is really just a committed relationship dynamic. When you have a coach or a consultant, guys, it's you have these compartmentalized structures of you're coaching you, do work, a couple times a week. You might have a phone call. They might give you some homework. They might give you a formula or a strategy. And then you do these step-by-step movements, and it does create some results. But as an accelerator, and what I've discovered in my life through those experiences, that the only way you really transform is by being very uncomfortable and be challenged in ways that you cannot control and in your most vulnerable state. There is no other way to do it. So I want to make sure that that lands even further, that there is no way for me to break down a step on how each part of my work with the client goes, because everybody's uniquely different and everybody has their own unique challenges, and every person has a different capacity in their performance, so that when they come to the table, it's going to be completely holistic and different each time I work with someone.
Yeah. Wylie, I'm curious because, I don't go on big roller coasters because I'm going to be scared if I go on that roller coaster.
Sure.
It seems to me that I may be listening to this going, I don't even know if I want to work with Wylie, because that scares the crap out of me. He's going to work me so hard and put me in positions that I'm not going to be comfortable with. He's going to make me go on those roller coasters. Can you maybe, instead of giving us, because I caught something very strong, which was a lot gets caught up in systems and processes and what's step one and what's step two and what's step three. And that is not your model. Your model is you don't know what the steps are. That's part of the unknown. That's part of yielding to it. But can you give us maybe an example, a case study of you working with somebody and how you actually got them to yield to the unknown and the intensity you brought, and maybe some examples of these cutting edge tools that you brought, just to give us an example. You don't have to name any names, but an example of how does one experience you as an accelerator?
Okay, let's delve into that. First and foremost, you're right. The reason why I have privacy as a paramount aspect of my work, because everybody nowadays, they use the notoriety of I've worked with so-and-so and it's so-and-so to give themselves credibility. But in the nature of my work, with the type of leaders that I have access to, giving them that freedom of exposure allows them to be the most vulnerable with me in the work that we do together. There is no need for people to know who they are, what they've gone through. So I want to make sure that I like that you said that. And again, that's a really important part for anybody listening. Goes, wow, I've never had an asset or a resource that keeps who I am and what I'm doing with them private. And that's good. That's actually part of their growth and their acceleration. So I'll give you an example so you can understand that if I'm in a dynamic with a client and I'm experiencing where they're hitting a wall when it comes to let's say finances, because that's a major thing with everyone. Everybody has a problem with money. People want to make more. People tend to bleed it. They don't understand why it doesn't, consistently flow in, or why it may going away from them. It's unknown to them. I had a public figure client who I knew from the time that we met, he had terror built up inside him from his childhood around finances. And he carried that with him his entire life, despite how much money he had made. Multiple eight-figure businesses. He's made over 50 million on his online platform, but he constantly made it and constantly lost it. And there was this constant fear and stress around his money, which impacted his team's function. It made people feel chaotic when they would go into work with him. It made his events not as optimal and as profitable as they could be, given who he is and what he does. And when I saw that, even in our first interaction together, I started to calibrate that person to this work that was being presented to him. When he was introduced to me, it wasn't as simple as, let's work together, here's a check. There is calibration with people. They need to, you're right, I'm intense. I understand that. People are going to get scared of the idea that I'm going to make them face very uncomfortable things that they don't realize they're holding on to. Yep. That's why it's only for a very exclusive type of leader who's willing to embrace that surrender the need to know how, step into the unknown and realize there's a reason I'm in your life. There's a purpose to our working dynamic together. And I'm going to make sure I get you past your limits to the top of your game. So all the results you are looking to achieve, you can sustain. You can experience peace and freedom with that success rather than the stress that you tend to carry with you. So to finish up that example with that guy, is I was able to make him sit in the terror and gave him a choice. Call all of your friends, all of your influencer friends, the big name people you know, the multimillionaires, the billionaires, and ask them to borrow money. It's as simple as that. And that simple task of being in that situation with that person, a public figure, this big guy who's just got it all figured out, but who's constantly burned out and stressed, I saw him panic and I saw the terror and I saw the fear rise to the surface. And I knew if he doesn't complete this, that is going to further galvanize within him. And he's never going to break free from that limitation and actually experience the acceleration and growth in his business and the wealth that he's looking to accomplish. Mm-hmm. So he freaked out, had his resistance in that moment. Okay. And I didn't care. What I cared about, I don't care about his comfort. I don't care about his reactions. I care about his freedom. I care about him feeling what he wants to feel and experience what he wants to feel. So I told him, here's the deal. This is the only way we're going to break free from the terror you are literally spewing out right now. If you don't think that this energy, this impacts your people, you're sadly mistaken. This is why you were constantly going in the roller, like you brought up that roller coaster, up and down and never getting off of it. This is why you're burned out. You're fried every day and you don't have a great relationship with your wife. Your kid is struggling. It's because of you. And this is a major component of it. And finally, he stepped up. I left his house to go get us lunch. He made the phone call. He called everybody in his network. I think one person said, sure, I'll take care of you, but only this amount. And I swear to you, when I got back to his house, the relief, the resolution, the way he looked in his face, the way he sat back in his chair, the freedom he said he started to feel just facing that terror and that demon allowed him to go into his next event 2 days later and 4x, 4x, 10x, everybody uses those terms. Yeah. He was able to make 4 times the amount of money at his event than he typically would make any other time. And he never really grasped the idea that this was in fact the blind spot that was hindering his performance. So I want to make sure that that's an example for you.
Thank you.
That's a great example. You reference it as a blind spot or a demon. Where do these blockages come from? Is this a childhood response thing, or why do we have these blockages and where do they originate?
It is from our life experiences. So I'm glad that you said that. Every aspect of who we are as human beings, we do not have a collective desire to resolve stress. We have this idea that we need to, and here's one very specific point to make. When you have a bad life experience as a child, you're taught to suck it up and deal with it. You're also taught to, you know what, you're older now, you've got a lot more on your plate. You should just get over it, let it go. Once you become aware of it, there's nothing you can do about it. And that's absolute BS. So what ends up happening is you basically take on and hold on to that past life experience, despite what it might be. It's suppressed within you energetically, emotionally, and even mentally, and it festers there your entire life. And then the more you grow, the more you try to innovate, the more you try to create, it's going to develop these undetectable patterns of doubt, fear, and cautiousness that seep out, especially when you're taking risks, especially when you're being challenged, especially when you're being demanded of more and more by people around you, by your business, etc. Nobody is immune to this. Not one human being on this planet is immune to this. The difference is most people are afraid to face those life experiences. We call it, I don't want to relive them. And nobody's saying relive them. What I'm saying is you need to actually address them. You need to be challenged that makes that unresolved, I call them unresolved stresses, come to the surface so we can actually do something about it. Therapy itself has its place, but it does not get to the root to the degree it needs to. It does not put people in real challenges that make them highly uncomfortable. Everything we have built as a society around personal development and growth, we have chalked it up to a need for some level of comfort and control. Give people their space. I hear it all the time. If somebody's not ready, don't push them. Well, why not? Why do you think we are struggling as a species? Is because people are afraid to actually say things that are very controversial towards each other. They're afraid to push people into realms that they're unwilling to go, and they're afraid to hold people accountable despite what they might experience as a reaction. So we kind of cater and acquiesce to the dysfunction that's around us, and we just build over that and then try to move forward with all of that, I would say, dirty energy lying underneath the carpet. And I'm saying we've got to get underneath the carpet and sweep it out.
That's terrific. So here's my understanding
Mhm.
is you'll work with people to understand their unresolved stresses and the blockages that hold back their peak performance for where they want to go. You'll also work with them to discover where they want to go if they don't know. And then with these unresolved stresses, you will put them in situations where they need to, in your words, embrace the suck of it and realize they're still okay. You don't need to be as afraid of that thing and as compensating about that thing as what you have been. The very fact that you've been compensating for that thing actually draws that energy you don't want back to you,
Right.
and it kind of unlocks this performance of the individual. How
Right.
is that as a summary?
That's a good summary. If I may, I would like to just
Please.
tighten it up with you as well. I
Yeah,
love
yeah.
that you said the word compensate. That's a major key phrase right there. I have found working with billionaires, celebrities, etc., that most if not all people of that caliber have been compensating their entire life. They are chasing something that keeps them away from all of that dysfunction, that stress, those life experiences that are uncomfortable. So they compensate, like you said, to try to achieve over here. And then they say, well, because I've made $100 million, I've grown multiple companies, I'm an Inc. 500 person, it's CEO, people know who I am, I'm successful. And then we are taught what defines success, what benchmark we should look for is money, notoriety, and growth. And we forget that we are holistic, dynamic beings, and that you're right. Every aspect of what we have not dealt with, it will come back to haunt us. It does, in fact, suppress all of our potential. And it does, I would say, filter our perceptions and our reality and makes us make decisions based on that versus understanding truly what is best for me and what is best for the decisions I'm making and the people that I impact. So, great summary, but I want to add this is think about the military. In the military, we are put through those real world challenges that push us to our brink and beyond mentally, emotionally, physically, and even energetically so that we can be left as this elite operating machine for our purpose. It's the same aspect. High achievers, high caliber leaders, that's why I only work with these types of people. They have the specific capacity to perform is great. So they are able to stay in these types of challenges and embrace it, even though they might not like it, because they understand I'm willing to do whatever it takes to take my game to the top. And I want to circle back to those cutting edge tools, all the cutting edge tools that we have out there. People are talking about psychedelics now, where people are talking about meditation constantly. We're looking at ways to optimize mindset, the ways to look at we can up level our performance when it comes to making money, how we grow ourselves in our business. What can we do to change our culture? I bring a holistic network of these cutting edge tools from the functional medicine aspect to the sports and nutrition and medicine to massage therapy. Every aspect of who you are should be looked at and addressed in real time. That is the only way you as a whole person can be optimized and accelerated to the top of your game. The idea that we can focus on one thing over here, like making money, and then hopefully turn around and that can then maybe bleed into our relationships or our health or every other aspect of we are is unfortunately a facade and it's a false way of operating. So with my work and like you just shared is I come into their lives when they are ready to take their game to the top, when this fork in the road is presented to themselves and no stone is left unturned because I understand that there's every component of who you are needs to be optimized simultaneously. The results, the byproducts are your power, your potential, your ability to innovate, create exponentially accelerated. The byproducts are you making tons of more money, having greater impact out in the world, and actually transforming our world around us rather than trying to figure out why it's constantly toxic and why it's not getting anywhere.
Talk to me about high achievers turning into high performers, the difference between the two, and how do you know when someone has become a high performer instead of just a high achiever?
Right. Okay. I will, let me give this a little short and sweet. So in my experience, I've looked at the way in which we approach life and business from the perspective and the insight of achievement. That's the same thing in sports. You're looking to achieve steps that grow you and eventually get you to the top. Performance itself is about understanding the definition that it's not just the quantifiable growth model anymore. Performance has everything to do with who you are, your relationship to yourself in any given moment. And that is what defines your ability to perform. I have approached it from my experience to understand that when your relationships are optimal, when your health is your highest standard, when you are clear mentally, emotionally, intuitively, spiritually, physically, when you know how to manage your inner volatility no matter what situation is going on, you know how to discern when you put your focus on something and when you don't allow people's toxicity, impact, and negativity, whatever labels we want to give it to, affect your decision making and your ability to operate. When you can create this environment for yourself where life is not about systems and strategies only, but it's from a place of just going what makes sense, how you feel, what your body's telling you, what your relationships are looking like. When you can get to that place, that is high performance. I'm trying to break away people's idea that high performance means I'm able to make a ton of money and I'm able to complete tasks and I'm able to grow things. That is an antiquated metric of high performance. High achievers are people that are able to accelerate themselves from step by step, get things done, accomplish goals, grow companies, sustain, I would say, legislation, move people into action is high achievement. That is achievement. But if high performance is the new standard, then you need to look at every aspect of your life. If you are only good at growing a company, making $1 billion, and inspiring people to try to be like you, you're still in an achievement aspect. And that's how I approach it from what it is that I've learned and discovered over the years. Now, people can argue with that, and that's okay. But what I'm sharing here, to answer your question, is to make sure that people realize that high performance is all about who you are in any given moment. It's all about you in a constant state of reflection to see where you're at, how you're evolving, constant state of looking inward and making sure every moment of every day that you're in a state of optimization, that you're willing to embrace challenge, you're willing to step into things that you don't really want to step into. That changes you from that high achiever to a high performer. And knowing the difference is what's going to actually transform you and allow you to really get to another level for yourself. So I really hope that that helps provide you even more insight to my understanding and insight of the difference between high achiever and high performer.
Yeah, that's very in depth. Very in depth. I want to take a little bit of a pivot here because you mentioned something a few moments ago that I feel entrepreneurs struggle with. Well, by the way, I think entrepreneurs struggle with all of this, right? Yielding to the fear of the unknown and dealing with some of these unresolved issues. But one area that I've personally had difficulty with is understanding the power of meditation. And you said earlier, high performance meditation, a bunch of different things. Help me understand that. If I was working with you and I was like, I don't really understand meditation. Can you tell me how that's going to help me? Can you talk to us in that vein in terms of what's the opportunity there and how does it work?
With meditation specifically, I want to make sure. Okay. Well, let me encompass this answer here is, as a performance accelerator, how I quote approach the clients that I work with in the work that I do is very holistic. So I do not come to the table with the same type of routine. Not everybody's going to be able to meditate or want to. I don't focus on you have to have these things in your arsenal if you want to be a high performer. What matters is understanding that we are capable of utilizing many different things for meditative purposes. The marketing aspect of it is close your eyes, try to stay focused, allow your thoughts to do whatever they're going to do. And I've studied many meditation models. But what I have found is I myself, like, I get it. You're right. I've dealt with, that's why I got to this point, whereas I've been able to understand how to yield to that fear, but I've also been able to learn how to utilize different aspects of my life as a meditative process. Like washing dishes is very meditative for me. It might not be for someone else. Doing laundry, vacuuming, these chores that I love to be a part of, where my wife is really grateful, is very meditative for me. And she even notices that, where I get into a state of just complete presence because I enjoy connecting to nature and things that I'm doing. And I bring that to the table to get people to understand, let's get you present with yourself. Let's get you present with what's going on around you and within you, and understanding that what is going on around you is because of what's going on within you. Let's get you clear and understanding that it's okay to slow down a little bit. It's okay to take a step back and actually pay attention and focus on every aspect of your life that you've overlooked or ignored to get to where you are today. And that is in itself, getting someone present just to do this type of work is meditative in itself. Now, I love meditating. I do it twice a day. Transcendental meditation, I was taught by the VA when I was doing a project with them with combat vets and PTSD. I developed my own thing called high performance meditation. It's very specific in the moment that I'm having with my client, where I get them to face a very specific stress so that we can create results in as little as 24 to 48 hours, and get them outside of their idea of struggling, where their thoughts are constantly racing and they can't slow down enough to just be present. And that's the excuse I hear all the time with leaders. I'm too busy. I'm too busy. I'm too busy. You're just creating that chaos because you have never had anybody ground you and hold you still for a moment and get more, quote, meditative with your life. So does that really give you a good insight for that?
It sure does. And you made a good point, which is, I think we all look at meditation as close your eyes and for 5 minutes, let your thoughts run down the river. And
I mean, brother, I jump out of
ways.
I jump out of airplanes. That's meditative sometimes for me too. I mean, you can find meditation in anything that you can bring yourself present to, even drinking a glass of water.
What's interesting though, Wylie, is we talk about, when I think about meditation, and you gave some examples where you're present, you're with yourself, you slow down, you're calm, your heartbeat goes down. That's like one side, right? But on the other side, it's, the fear of the unknown and embracing the suck and getting, but it's very interesting how there's like two complete sides to, your framework maybe, which is part going into these dark areas of people's psyche and minds to surpass it. But maybe that's what they need to do to get to the other side, where they can actually be present. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Absolutely. And I understand myself, given the path that I was put on, getting to that level of, I would say, self-mastery, but I'm constantly being held accountable at every moment. I have my own outside force. So I'm in a space where I'm understanding that, again, as a human being, things evolve, and it's crucial to evolve with them. That you cannot see yourself as stopping and being, quote, done, but it does mean you can, in fact, perform consistently where you want to perform. And what you shared makes total sense, where I discovered who I was and know that I'm built to go into the trenches to battle that darkness with people. And that is the most freeing experience, when you're able to actually get through that together and allow them to explode to the other side, and realize it may have been very uncomfortable in the moment, but it happened very fast, and I slingshotted you to where you wanted to go, rather than you spending 20 years in therapy trying to figure out things. It's like, if you're willing to actually embrace that suck and slow down and face that darkness, that is where your true power and potential really resides. And I marry those two. You have that one side you said, and you have the other side of the framework, but I marry those two and realize that you need to embrace both sides, because trying to make them mutually exclusive is why people are in limitation. You are missing so much value in even the most uncomfortable of moments. And until you can allow a relationship that shows up that seems different, something that you're facing at work or in business, a challenging new merger, whatever you are presented with, if it's uncomfortable, if it's ugly, there's still value in your ability to accept it for a moment, see how it presents solutions to you, and maybe some gold that you can take away, despite whether or not you work with that coach, or you hire that consultant, or you bring on someone who pushes you in ways you don't want to be pushed. It doesn't matter. But what we do as a knee-jerk reaction is, when it feels awful, when it doesn't look the way that we expect it to look, when it makes us feel things that we don't realize we are still carrying, we want to push it away as our first knee-jerk reaction. And I am telling people that are listening,
Yep.
The only way you're going to, in fact, access your potential and really accelerate yourself is welcoming that in and embodying it, like I did as a bull rider. Every time I sat down on the back of a bull, because I was able to embody that discomfort and that feeling of, oh my gosh, I have no idea what's going to happen when I call this gate and this bull blows out. But every time I did that, my performance got better. It optimized. I was able to focus better. I was able to connect better to the bull. I felt myself becoming one with that animal, and I was able to ride longer and mark 8 seconds every time, which is the typical go-to in rodeo. So I want to make sure that that was, an important point for your question is being able to welcome both sides and marrying them together and understand by embracing that even your own darkness and facing it, there's so much behind it that can actually take you to where you want to go and create those results you want.
Yep, absolutely. I understand. Do you have a book coming out?
I'm writing it right now. Yeah.
Writing it right now? Okay.
It's such a labor of love, man. I'm telling you.
And never an easy process.
No, it's
Never an easy process.
yeah. War was my vacation, and right now, tentatively, I think 2022 at some point. And I got a really great team of copywriters and people that do this for a living around me. Really kind of keeping they're keeping me in the space of, hey, look, I'm not a writer, and it's not comfortable to write. So getting all of who I am onto paper is not an easy task. So. But yeah, war was my vacation. It's really about understanding where the real battlefield is, who the real enemy is, and what it takes for you to be a warrior in your life and business, and giving people access to that. Yeah.
You had talked about helping people become more of who they want to be. What about our entrepreneurs who are listeners who go, that sounds great. I have no idea who I want to be. How do you work with people to discover more about themselves and who they want to be?
I think we'll tie in everything that we've discussed thus far is being in a position to eradicate stress, to face what might plague you, to look at your life from a completely different perspective without those convenient filters that are clouding your truth, gives you more awareness to your own personal power and your potential that then breeds or births more of that understanding of who you really want to be. What I have found and I have experienced and seen, and you both can probably agree with this, and I think everybody listening probably agree with this, is because we step out into the world and we want to be successful and we want to chase performance and we want to accomplish what we see other people accomplishing, we tend to get caught up in what I call the learn and copy method. And I even wrote a paper on the homepage of my website called Helping versus Optimizing, and understanding why high achievers are wasting their life chasing peak performance instead of mastering it. And inside that paper, this academic style paper, if anybody wants to read it, discusses that learn and copy method that has not evolved since childhood. And what I mean by that, guys, is when we're kids, as we're growing up 0 to 6, we are mimicking the world around us so we can grasp this new crazy place that we were just brought into. And we want to learn from our parents and mimic behaviors and attitudes and demeanors until we can start developing our own personality. What ends up happening is human beings have not evolved that far that fast. So it's still a part of us. And what we do is when we get lost in this idea, I don't truly know who I am just yet or where I really want to go, but I want to do something, we mimic household names and other people that have built empires, and we see these successful people and go, I want that too. And then we get caught up in trying to be like them, and we forget or lose access to who we really are in the process. So we buy into the way they have built their success and think that we can apply it or try to apply it to our life. And most of it is unfortunately conceptualized marketing, and people get high and get excited about the concept of making $100,000 for a $10,000 investment. But a vast population that does that fails because they are trying so hard to do exactly what steps were brought forth to make that person successful. And it does not address what in fact is still in the way that doesn't allow you to apply or be able to understand how to utilize those tools for your benefit. It becomes a grind and becomes a struggle, and people get caught on this path of needing to find more and invest more and keep going down the road of learning, copying others versus really stopping and saying, what am I missing and why am I not doing the work that it actually takes to discover who I really am and where my power is derived from and what it means to access what it is that I want to accomplish. So when I work with leaders, high achieving leaders, people of different industry in the dynamic they are in already, they kind of know who they are to a degree and what they want to accomplish. But what's surprising is they're not fulfilled in that because they themselves have just got on the rat race, become caught to the rat race of just innovating based on the stress and based on what they think people want. And they have never slowed down to consider, do I really want to be doing this? Is this really what moves me and then it consequently moves people around me? Or am I just caught up in the grind and the expectation of our society's definition of success?
Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Wylie, last question for you as we kind of look to bring this to a close today. How do you hope to be remembered in your lifetime? What is the legacy you wish to live on how you'll be remembered?
Thank you for asking, because nobody's ever asked that question before. The legacy that I'm coming out of the shadows after 13 years. Again, this pandemic changed everything for everyone. But at this point, what I'm very committed to and very passionate about is providing leaders who are done struggling and stressing, who are over the repackaged and repurposed resources that are available to them, who are ready to face their truth, which there are many celebrities coming out right now talking about facing their truth and wanting to address their childhood and look at all the reasons why that they have been such a quote high achiever. I'm bringing access to something that cares about transforming that paradigm so that these leaders can in fact become optimized versions of themselves, so that the impact that they have on millions of people around them actually grows the way they say they want it to grow. Unfortunately, what I've witnessed and what I'm seeing, especially being behind the scenes and meeting so many different people of different levels, is they are not in congruency with what they are marketing, what they're pitching, what they're advertising, or how they're talking to the masses. And what I want my legacy to be is more about what I want them to be. At the end of the day, I don't do this because I need some notoriety or attention on Wylie, who he is and what he's done. What I care about is putting people of positions of power and influence in the right places so that the impact that they have actually changes our world and it stops creating dysfunction in our world. And I'm seeing it even with our politicians. They are people that are completely out of whack right now. And for me, the legacy that I hope to leave is that I get to work with certain types of people of power and influence that are really ready to face their truth and actually do something about it versus just talking about it.
And from the sounds of it, I certainly believe that your time on this podcast will contribute to that legacy, as that'll be left for our listeners. Thank you so much for your wisdom and for your time today.
I appreciate it, brother. Thank you very much.
Please stick around for a few more minutes while Rich and I break down this episode.
Rich, yield to the fear of the unknown. And what struck me in this conversation was the movie with Tom Cruise where he's like, you can't handle the truth. A lot of leaders and entrepreneurs cannot handle the truth of their current state. So they seek coaches. They're going to guide them along really nicely, not really hold them too accountable, but they still don't get where they want to get. In this particular situation, not only do you need to be willing to handle the truth, you got to be willing to handle the intensity that is added by Wylie and his framework.
Yeah, and his whole approach to performance acceleration through self-mastery. And I love that both you and I came from a little different angles to try to find out, so what is that? So how does that work? Like, get a little bit of learning. And essentially the answer we got is, it's different for everybody. Here's what I know. People have things that are stresses that hold them back from their optimal performance. I'll find out what those are, and I'll help you de-stress so that doesn't hold you back anymore.
Yep.
That's what I do. And you're going to get your optimal performance. And I loved the breakdown between the high achievers and high performers. I'd never really thought about the difference between the two.
Yeah, nor had I. The other part that I think came through this conversation is a lot of leaders, entrepreneurs, executives deal with certain stresses. And you know where they deal with the most amount of stress? It's where they have the most fear of the unknown. You would have the most stress in your life if you had to go run a 2-day conference for CertaPro and you weren't prepared, as an example, right?
Oh,
It'd be
yeah.
the most stress you ever had this year, probably, versus a customer that's pissed at you. You'd be like, oh, I know how to deal with this. You know how to handle it. And so the fear of the unknown, when you eradicate that stress that you have in your life, which basically means, one of our former mentors would say, put that flashlight in the dark corner. Go address that issue in the dark corner versus avoiding that dark corner. When you go and address that issue in the dark corner, you eradicate that stress, then I think you can perform different forms of meditation, quite honestly, with yourself to think through, okay, now what do I want? I have this stress out of my life now. What do I really want with it? My life? Where do I want to go next? What do I want to create? What's on my to-do list or my bucket list, right? And eradicating that stress is so important, yet so many people just avoid it.
I think it's almost comical that you use the example of a flashlight, because one of the quotes I wrote down is Wylie said, "I'm built to go into the darkness with people."
Yep.
And essentially use that flashlight and illuminate where he can help unlock high performance.
Yep.
One other thing I know you and I can relate to from how we were raised in business, where it was a no excuses mentality. It did not matter what happened. If you did not achieve the results, you're responsible for it. You could have done something. And one of the things that he said that really resonated with me on that note is what's going on around you is because of what's going on within you.
Ooh, I missed that one.
And I feel like that is a really empowering phrase. There's no victimhood in that. When you believe what's going on around me is because of what's going on within me, and what's going on within me, I can transition, I can deal with, I can change, and it will change my circumstance. There is no victimhood in our businesses. It's because of what we've done or not done that's created it.
Yeah, I missed that, but that is pretty deep. The lack of accountability, in my mind, is something that I fear is getting worse. I think our parents' generation and they were very accountable for what they needed to do, right? In this everybody gets a trophy world, there's a lack of accountability. And when things don't go well around you, it's because of that person, this thing, COVID, whatever. There's externalization that happens all over the place. But those who ask themselves that question, things aren't going well around me, there must be something within me that's not going well, and work to improve themselves with that introspective thought process can really make a big difference in their trajectory.